Welcome to the MIT IT Innovation Program podcast. This is a repository of insights by thought leaders and practitioners of innovation where they speak about their views, insights, and experiences. Come join us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Healthcare Innovations for Today. My name is Priya Dhawan, and I'll be your moderator. I work as the Head of Collaborations, Branding, and Outreach at the MIT ID Innovation Program, and I'm excited to be hosting the session today. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, the multi-skilled, the multi-talented Dr. Jagdish Chaturvedi. He is an ENT surgeon, runs his private ENT clinic, and carries out surgical procedures at Fortis Hospital, Bangalore. He is the founder and CEO of High Innovations Private Limited and holds an MBA degree in entrepreneurship and hospital management. He is recognized as one of the 35 innovators under the age of 35 by the MIT Technology Review 2016. Dr. Chaturvedi is the author of the best-selling book on medical device innovations in India called Inventing Medical Devices, A Perspective from India. He is a Stanford India Biodesign Fellow. His core expertise lies in the process of identifying and analyzing unmet clinical needs for quick development of low-cost and high-quality medical devices, and teaching training the biodesign process. He has co-invented and developed 18 affordable medical devices addressing the unmet needs in the Indian healthcare system, many of which have been taken over by indigenous companies, while some have formed startup companies for further development and commercialization. Most importantly, since laughter is the best medicine, he is a stand-up comedian as well, popularized by his YouTube channel, Jagdish Chaturvedi. Before we proceed to listen to Dr. Jagdish, I have a few updates to share about this session and the MIT ID Innovation Program webinar platform. Firstly, today's webinar will have the speaker share his insights interspersed with questions as we move along. Next, we'd love to hear from you during today's webinar. If you have a question for our speaker, please feel free to share it via the chat mode. If we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we will surely follow up with answers offline. This webinar will be available after the session on our various social channels, and future webinars will be accessible through the same link you are using now. We'd like to encourage you to share today's webinar and its learnings with your social networks. This curated series on healthcare innovations for today will feature a variety of industry thought leaders like Dr. Jagdish Chaturvedi, who are a part of the MIT ID innovation system. MIT stands for the 4-decade-old Maharashtra Institute of Technology. ID stands for MIT's 15-year-old Institute of Design. Its latest offering, which is the one-year innovation program, which aims to create a new breed of comprehensive innovators, informed by design thinking, influenced by future technologies and trends, and inspired to make their own mark in the global scenario, be it political, social, economic, or technological. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome our guest speaker today, Dr. Jagdish Chaturvedi. Dr. Jagdish, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Priya, for the wonderful, introduction, which I only shared with you, but thanks for reading it out.
Sure.
It's great. I love being part of sessions like these, and it's great to see that, innovations is being talked about. My brief background, I'm sure a lot of you may already know, and Priya shared some of it, but my first journey of innovations happened during my training as a ENT surgeon. I was at St. John's Medical College, and I was learning how to be an ENT doctor. We call it a postgraduate, course there, master's program. And I think during the end of my first year, we faced a challenge in one of the rural areas. We were trying to look at people's, throats and trying to examine them. But we used very prehistoric tools. We used to use very age-old tools to assess the throat, and I was not very good at it. And that's where the first MC, I think, for any innovation to happen, there has to be a fear or concern of something negative that can happen, right? That's why you want to invent for it, to improve for it. And though many doctors were very skilled in using those very prehistoric tools, they were like just a mirror at the end of, with one handle, with a probe. It's like a metallic probe with a small mirror. You have to put it at the back of the throat and flash a light and see the voice box. And you're expected to pick very early lesions, most of the times related to cancer, because in rural areas, people are smoking BDs and chewing tobacco and gutka and all of that. And I really could not honestly make out anything. And then I thought it was just me who was not able to grasp that skill. But I found out a lot of my peers and colleagues would not understand how to use the mirror effectively. And that's when the first idea for an invention came, that, why can't I just use an existing video camera and use an endoscopy system and make a handheld portable device. So I think, whenever you want to think of invention, there has to be 2-3 aspects to it. One is, that there is an unmet need, and whether the need is big enough. If it is just me struggling to make use of that mirror, it's not a very big need. It's a skill issue, and there are some people who are just not good at certain things. But if you see that, okay, this is a wider problem, and it is affecting a lot of people, then you see the opportunity of impact. And I think it is a mixture of both of these, unmet need and a large impact, and understanding the audience, or understanding the end user. I think it's a mix of these 3 things, which makes it a good opportunity for innovation. But unfortunately, I see a lot of people inventing only with one of these, which is the unmet need. They have thought of a gap out of a single experience. It's just been a one-point experience. Maybe they experienced it in their life, or they saw some of their relatives go through a bad medical experience, or some experience that becomes the sole nidus to invent, which is a bit dangerous, because you may spend a lot of your valuable time working on something which may actually not be impactful. And secondly, you could have worked on something else that could have made a difference. So there has to be a combination of these 3 things. There has to be an unmet need, but there has to be an assessment of the impact, that if this need is solved, what is the size of that impact? And whether there is a traction for that impact to be solved. Do people want to solve this problem and create that impact? And lastly, whether we understand from the end user, what is it that they want to be solved? And especially when it comes to technologies, who's going to pay for it and who's going to use it? What kind of skill requirements? It's a mix of all of this that needs to be done. But it's not a very intuitive process, because the moment you face a problem, the idea comes first. And we have a tendency to fall in love with our ideas very quickly. And once you fall in love with something, then all the answers outside seem like it's supporting your love, right? That's how crushes happen, and that's how hearts are broken. But it's a very similar process. Getting an idea is like falling in love, right? It's your own idea, you've created it, and then people become very defensive about it, and then they start only seeing things that support them. And we've seen so many technologies, 3 to 5 years down the road, not surviving, teams splitting up, technologies going, because the whole spectrum was not assessed. And out of my 18 devices, there are only 9 that have been commercial, 10 have failed. And I have a very influential mentor who's been mentoring me, who got me to work on my first invention, Dr. Ravi Nair. Initially, when I used to give these talks, I used to only just talk about the devices that I used to be, which have made some sort of success. Either they have been licensed out, or whether they have reached the market. So I used to say, I'm an inventor of 3 medical devices. And then once after the talk, and he said, Jagdish, you are not an inventor of 3 medical devices. If you say that, you're giving a very wrong message. So I'm like, why, sir? These are the only 3 that have made it as inventions. He's like, no, you have to also tell how many you were involved in. And out of that, there were 3. And then you are giving the right message to the people. Other people will think that, anything you touch is becoming, like the Midas touch. Anything he touches becomes a successful invention. So I always now put a score on, actually have 22 technologies that I've been involved in, and only 9 have been have been successful. And the success also is not, you can't really define success in medtech. It's a very long journey. But here, I think all the devices that have at least been commercially available and have crossed impacting more than 100 people is I think what I would call one of all those 9 devices have done. So that's why, I think one of the things to be an innovator and entrepreneur is to constantly understand what the end user wants. Like for example, everything starts with an assumption, and the assumption is based on what we've learned before or others have followed, and then there is a validation from the end user. And the more and more you do that, you realize your assumptions were very far away from your end user. And that's why even for this session, there's a request that I would like to make. I could talk about many things over the next 20 minutes. I don't even know how much of it would be useful for you. I don't even know what all I've said so far. Does it even matter to you, right? I'm assuming it. And that is not a strong entrepreneurial approach. If I want to make this 1 hour session useful for you, I need to understand what is it that you want to know. It's your session. If I talk about myself, I'm not going to learn anything new. I may just, have a nice nostalgic moment. I'm like, how are you, sab kiya? But what is it useful for you? I will never know. And I will never learn anything if I don't know what is it that you want. And this is a validation exercise I do in every webinar. I've done over 100 now over the last 3 weeks, with about averaging 7 webinars a day. And initially, I just used to go talking, but I never used to learn anything. But now, when I try to make it interactive, I also understand what is it that people want to know. And that makes a big difference. So my request is, if you want to ask a question anytime, don't wait for the 30 minutes of things that you might find irrelevant. If you feel that there's something that you want to hear from me, then please shoot your question out to Priya. Priya, I request you that even in between the first 30 minutes, if there's any interesting question that you feel that can be addressed, I would love to take that, because that's the only way I learn about the audience, and I learn about what is it that they find relevant. And I'll tell you how that's been useful. In these last 3 weeks, when I've started to understand the audience, I realized that there is a requirement for an online basic course on entrepreneurship, because the questions that people were asking were more related to how can they do, how can they invent, how can they mitigate a certain strategy. So when we started getting a lot of those questions, we just released an online basic online course on healthcare entrepreneurship, which you can also take through our platform Hi. But it's that. So if I have an assumption that people will want to learn about innovations, 12 participants who are undergoing this 6-week course with one-on-one sessions like this, but they're learning very I would say minute details of how to innovate and how to develop technologies or how to solve their ideas, both in devices and in software. But basically, the expertise that I provide is on how to identify a need and how to see whether this can be made into a commercial technology that will impact people and help improve healthcare. But the other things, I'm sure you can get, these kind of overviews you can get even from a lot of talks I've given online, a lot of TEDx talks and other things. If you want a good immersive experience on entrepreneurship and how I started off becoming an innovator, you can watch our web series called Starting Troubles. It basically is a very nice, humorous way of showing our entire journey. The same thing about how I use the mirrors and identified and made a handheld portable device. You can watch that on our platform called Hi, HIIIH. You can download the app or watch it on the website. And you can watch that and you can understand more closely as to what are the various challenges and issues while trying to invent something for the first time. So I think with this overview, Priya, I would move on to the next segment. So this is basically how I would look at innovations, and it's very important to identify an unmet need, validate it with the end user, and also assess impact. And it has to be a combination of these 3 things.
Sure. So, just as we mentioned earlier, all questions can be shared via chat mode by the participants, during the session itself. So I look forward to those questions coming in. I wanted to know that, again, like I asked earlier, that how did you come about the name of your company? Interestingly.
There's a funny story to it. So I'm a very impulsive person, and that is also one of the reasons why probably I am always involved in too many things, because if something excites me, I jump the gun, and then I obviously mess up a lot, failed a lot, and then that helps me how to solve the problems. So when we wanted to create a platform, so with about 10 years of inventing devices, one of the biggest gaps I have identified as the reason, one of the top reasons why startups fail is because they don't have a good team.
Okay.
As easy as that. There are technologies that are not very good, but they had a good team. They're all commercial now. Because if you have a good team that stays through that 3 to 5 years and works together and figures out how to solve the problem, they will figure out and make the technology better, and reduce the gap of misunderstandings and still bring the product out. But if the team breaks, the product cannot move forward. The product is not going to self-develop itself. And the gap that we identified is that is the problem when somebody has an idea and then creates a team. But what I have learned out of my experience and also the Stanford Biodesign process is that the team has to come before the generation of the idea. ये chronology समझना ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है. So like people say, no, chronology samjhiye, so you understand what I'm talking about. But this is a very important chronology, because if you have an idea first, like suppose if Jagdish has an idea and now I'm looking for a product designer and a mechanical engineer to develop my idea, it will always be my idea and a team is working for me or on my idea, because I have that first step into the conceptualization. So then the other people don't engage so much with the same vested interest and passion. They'll say, we'll work as an employee, or they'll take a smaller stake in the company, but they're always going to be less vested than me. It's going to be my baby more than theirs. And that is a very I would say an unstable parameter to start a company or an innovation that's going to take 3 to 5 years to develop. And many times it has led to a lot of conflicts. It's your idea, so you will say this, and it's not, or you won't find people investing money. Your co-founders will not be investing money. There's not equal vested interest. That is very, very important. But if the team is created first, let's say, I find a product designer and an engineer and say, yeah, pediatrics, I think we need to solve something. So we have identified the area, but we have not identified what exactly we're solving. And then the three of us together go and talk to pediatricians, spend 1 or 2 months in the hospital, research, and we find out, this thing about, children, they are being transported from one hospital to the other. They cannot breathe in between when they have lung failure. Let's make a device that supports them. Then it's everyone's vested interest. It's everyone's vested idea. And that is a very strong passion to take the product out, because then even if for some unforeseeable reason 1 or 2 people, one person drops out, there's still 2 others who can take it forward. And then it's everyone's idea. And that unbiasedness in the beginning is very important for the team to go forward. So I wanted to make a team finding platform called HI, because it's like HI. It's like HI for healthcare and HI for healthcare innovations. And I wanted to solve this gap of finding the team before the ideation occurs. And I wanted to call it HI. My co-founder wanted to call it HI, and together we said that, and we announced it also. And then later on, we're like, "Yaar, website to banaya nahi." So for website, we went and we quite obviously, did not get a hi.com or hi.in. It was all taken. Then we are like, oh God, now we have to change the spelling. So we started adding another I. So hi.in, .com also did not get. Then we started adding one more I. Then became too many I's. It was become hi. And like, oh no, that's taking away from our motive of hi. So we started adding H's. So we made HIH, HIIH. HIIH, we got .in. So we're like, okay, now we are getting it as hi.in, which HIIH. But I spent enough time in the government, so I learned how to make full forms for things. So then we called it Healthcare Innovation in Indian Healthcare and locked the name hi.in.
Fantastic.
So that is how it came.
Excellent. I think that's how it is, right? You just kind of keep moving on with the flow. What is the importance of experimentation and prototyping in innovation?
Yeah, that is the way to go ahead in innovation. So I think, there is some amount of planning that is required, but I think the sooner you start experimenting, the more you're going to fail, and that is extremely crucial in making a successful product. I think one of the problems with our mindset, especially while innovating in India, is that there is a lot of aversion towards failing. There is a lot of stigma towards failing, even if it's a small experiment or if it's a small thing. Even amongst team members, you're like, "Arey yaar, iska idea fail ho gaya hai." You know, that kind of thing we've seen a lot with young startups, even with older startups, with the team starting to stigmatize. And there's always this thing, ingrained that, if whatever I think, if it has to work, and if it works, I'm good, which is very important. I'm not saying it's not important, but it's important in many professions. But when you're inventing something, when you're creating something, the sooner you fail, the earlier you fail, the stronger the innovation becomes, because then you have figured out all the ways it goes wrong before it starts reaching the patient. And that's a very, very critical thing when it comes to prototyping or innovations and all of that.
Okay.
So one of the things that I encourage a lot is to be a little impulsive when you're inventing. Try out, make something, but make it cheap. Don't spend too much money and time in your initial ideas, but try them and then see where it is working, where it is not working, and then start improvising on it, and then take an investment or take a bigger skin in the game and then develop it. But if you avoid that failing and then start putting in more of your time and effort, and then you fail, I mean, obviously every technology in its development process will have to fail. I mean, it's not a choice, it is the process, because you either let the technology fail before you commercialize, or it will fail after you commercialize. And we see this all the time, right? We've seen Samsung phones blow up after commercialization. It's not like they haven't failed enough, but the technologies in different scenarios are going to react differently. And you have to subject your ideas and technologies to as many variables as possible, as much as possible before commercializing it, because especially in healthcare, before it interacts with people's lives, the technology has to fail. And that's a strength I bring, because it's very hard for me to miss failing in as many ways as possible. So, my engineers are very upset with me. They give me a device, it's broken within 5 to 10 seconds of me touching it. And then they realize, oh, we have to make it idiot proof. Failing. And I think, the Stanford Biodesign philosophy is fail first, fail fast, fail cheap. I think that is something that one needs to follow and ingrain in your startup or in your team or in your organization very early on. I'll give you one interesting example. When I was in the US, and for the part of the Stanford Biodesign training, we had a meeting with Dr. Thomas Fogarty. Now, for the non-medical fraternity, Thomas Fogarty is kind of like the godfather of medical inventions, because he invented something called as a Fogarty balloon catheter, which was the first time a balloon was used to break clots in the heart. And he was a college dropout, and he worked in his father's car mechanic shop, and he saw that clogged tubings in the car with oil, they used to use a balloon to dilate it and remove it. He's like, why can't I use it to dilate the vessels in the heart? And today, interventional cardiology basically uses balloon catheters, and balloon catheters are a huge safe way to solve a lot of clinical challenges. We went for a meeting with him. He had called all his innovators for one new technology, and the title of that 3-hour meeting is, why hasn't this technology failed enough? And for us who came from India, we're like, why? It's a good thing if it's not failed enough. But they were very concerned, genuinely concerned. And they were like, are we not testing it properly? Are we not doing enough things? Why are we not failing enough? The same thing, you are having your questions in your mind today when you see number of COVID cases in India less. You can't believe it, right? You're like, why are we testing enough? How come, the numbers are not as high as they should be? That's exactly how their startup was also looking, that, normally when we develop a technology, it fails much more. Why hasn't this failed enough? What's wrong? What are we missing? And I think that is the kind of mindset of pro-failing in the innovation process, not post, is very, very critical.
Great. From Ruchika, would like to ask that how do you evaluate if your team has the same passion and work ethic as you? And while we move on, I just wanted to share with everyone that chat mode has been set to everyone by default. Please start sharing your questions. Yes, Dr. Chaturvedi, please go
Uh,
ahead.
there's a lot of noise. So if I didn't get you, just confirm if I got your question right. You're asking is how do we come to know if the team has the right passion or mindset, right?
Just a second, 1 minute. Correct, and the same work ethic.
Same work ethics. Okay.
Right.
Uh, so this is something we have done in High also is we identified what is the right innovations and medical device innovations perspective. The average journey to bring a technology to market for a moderately complex technology is 3 years. And for some more complex technologies, it can be 5 years. Now, so one of the parameters that's very important with your team members is they need to be available for 3 to 5 years. So with that, having students as a part of the team automatically goes out of the question, because students to commit for 3 to 5 years is very, very difficult and very challenging. They'll obviously get an MBA, they'll go abroad or some course or something that they like to do. And even in our analysis of the startup companies that have come out, 90% of the startup companies that have disintegrated are those that have had student profile innovators. So we want to work on a technology. One of the main parameters that we look for is a team from whichever background, whether it's a doctor, whether it's an engineer, whether it's a product designer, or whether it's a MBA person. We look for someone with at least 5+ years of experience who can absorb no pay for at least 1 year, and who can give 3 to 5 years of their time for this new technology that we're going to work on. That mindset is very, very important. And fourth most important is for a co-founder should be willing to invest in the startup with money, not with time and expertise. Okay. Money in the co-founders have to invest money into the startup. In High, the co-founders have put in their money, and that is how you identify the shareholding. It's a very mathematical thing. I see a lot of this going around. Arey, you join my team, I will give you equity for your expertise and time. No investor is going to touch you for the rest of your journey because you've started off with a very wrong principle of giving stake. You don't give stake against anything other than money. There is for employees something called as an ESOPs, employee stock option program. There is where you give sweat equity, where it vests over 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years of their time in the company. But you don't bring co-founders who are not willing to invest. Then you will not have the work ethics, you will not have the vested interest, you will not have the passion. So we look at these 3 or 4 parameters when we're looking at co-founders. 5 years experience, willing to spend 3 to 5 years, can sustain themselves and their family for 1 year if no pay has to be given, because most likely for the first 6 months to 9 months, you're not going to generate any revenues or get any funding. And fourthly, you should be able to at least put in 1 to 5 lakhs in your company, so that, and if there are 2 or 3 co-founders that put a cumulative, a startup pool of 3 lakhs to 5 lakhs, that's good enough to get you to a significantly well-developed prototype. A lot of the validation, a lot of the things that are done. And we provide services like those which support people in that cost frame. And I think those are the parameters that we look at. So if you go to the High app and if you look for a team member, you will see something which is very unique. Is before even connecting with the team member or the profile, you will be able to see their expectation, whether they are willing to work as a co-founder who's willing to invest and take shares, or whether someone wants to work as a project or a consultant for a fee, or someone wants to work on a salary basis. These are things that nobody discusses in your first 2-3 meetings, and that wastes a lot of time when you're evaluating team members. We bring that out at the profile stage. You don't even have to chat with the person or even meet the person if it does not match those criteria. You will see the criteria. If they match, then only you talk to them, your chance of conversion and forming a team is higher. So these are the parameters.
I see. And how do you analyze the performance of your team? Is it possible to have a result every day? I mean, how do you go about doing that?
We are so we are very activity based and outcome based parameters. So for example, now you can't expect an outcome every day, but we what we do is, suppose for example, I'll give you a real life example. So suppose there's a team that's created, and in the we then set 3 months to lock which idea we're going to work on. So let's say we've given a 3-month timeline.
Sure.
To identify the need, validate the need, and come up with the solution that we are going to work on as a team. Now, the team has not thought of that yet, but a team is created and the broad area is identified. Maybe pediatrics, maybe orthopedics, maybe COVID, whatever.
Right.
But what in it is not been identified. You can't also go like, yaar, chalo kuch karte hain, tufani karte hain. It's not that broad that you want to get your team. You want to get your team focused on an area, but not exactly knowing what specific you're going to solve. So then we chalk out what activities will we do. If I want to know what solution I'm going to solve in 3 months, the first 1 month has to go in need identification, which is then we get hospital access. We spend 1 month in the hospital. We shadow clinicians, shadow patients, identify the needs. We follow a process of need identification. We list them up. Then the second month we do research on each need to see. We have a scoring formula to see which is the most important, impactful need from all dimensions. And the last one is a validation, and okay, this is going to take more than 3 months. We discussed that early on. Okay, because of these new learnings, we have to extend it for 2 to 3 months. So it's very activity and outcome based with a deadline monitoring that is done. And if we find that every activity is getting delayed, if we find out that every outcome is being pushed consecutively, over 6 months to 9 months, then we start getting a red flag that something's wrong. Either we are working on something that's not important, or either we are not working properly. And then we do a due diligence. But normally it will take at least 9 months to a year to decide, even if you want to kill a team or a project.
Okay. Oh, great. So I would also now like to take the question from Nandini Gupta, who wants to know that how can we bring innovation to society than just a smaller part of it?
How can we bring innovation
to society than just a smaller part of it? I guess what she's talking about is again designing for the billions, humanities.
Yeah, you can design for the billions of humanity. See, one of the most important things that you have to figure out in any innovation is how is it going to scale and reach the society. Now, you may be very passionate, very altruistic, kuch karna hai, on this, I'm going to save billions of lives. But when it comes down to the ground reality, the last couple of people who are going to be involved in getting that to the society will think very differently. Take the COVID-19 situation. There are so many people who are inventing on ventilators, very quick fixes on better ventilators, smaller ventilators, cheaper ventilators, different masks, different, PPE equipment, different testing kits. But they all want to impact the masses with all the best intentions. But is the distribution, manufacturing, sales team aligned with it? Because at the end of the day, you're going to buy this from a pharmacy or you're going to get this at a hospital, right?
Right.
Providing it to them. It is not the CEO or innovator with a huge vision that is doing that, talking with 500 hospitals or 10 or 1,000 hospitals in India. It is some distributor that sells to a hospital. There are so many stakeholders involved along the way. They will all be in line with whatever you're saying, but then they follow a particular sort of a business model or a particular sort of an upside that they need to get to do it. Like, I'll tell you one thing. I'll give you this very interesting example. I went to a pharmacy to buy a medicine for one of my relatives, and very interestingly, there were 7 people in the pharmacy. There were 3 shopkeepers, and there were 3 other people standing with 1 meter distance, and there was me. And everyone had a mask except me. And I openly said, I am the guy who's in the hospital seeing the patients. And I asked for a mask, and they said, we don't have a mask. And I said, do you see the irony here, boss? The 3 of you who don't, who are standing and selling the masks are wearing masks. The 3 people over here who have come for some other clinical reason are wearing a mask. I am a doctor who's in front line here. I'm an ENT doctor. I see these patients with the highest risk. I am not able to buy a mask. And then, what he said? Like, sir, the government has put a cap in the mask. वो जिस rate पे वो mask हमको बेचते हैं, हम उसको बेच ही नहीं सकते. Like, we will not make anything. In fact, we will incur a loss if we sell it. So we have stopped asking our vendor to supply masks to us at that cost.
Okay.
What do? It's not solving the problem. I am still not getting masks. A lot of my doctor friends do not have PPE. You might be thinking that मैं PPE बनाऊंगी, support. But the guy who's going to supply it, he has got a government order that you cannot price it beyond this. And if you don't price it, if he does not price it beyond it, he does not do business. He does not survive. So he will stop selling that product. So there is so many elements to getting a solution to the society. It is just not a brilliant idea and a unique solution. It is thinking about all the stakeholders involved, and everyone needs to be in line with it positively. They might be with it in your thoughts, but it also has to align with them monetarily. It also has to align with them as a business that they follow for all their other products. If you're not going to align it to that, your idea will never reach. The government has raised crores and crores of rupees. There's a lot of money that's gone into PPEs. It is not reaching the end user. I get a doctor from AIMS saying, Jagdish, you make awareness videos. Please make this an awareness video that all the PPEs supplied to AIMS are not even reaching the doctor, because all the office people are taking all the PPEs and keeping it and hoarding it for their worst case scenario. Even after it is going into the hospital, it is not reaching the doctors. You see, there are too many people involved in the whole chain. You need to understand that chain. You need to think that your solution has to positively impact all the critical people in that chain. Just not you and your brilliant idea. And that is something that will make it realistic for you to bring your technology to the market. And that's how you will solve for the billions in society. So for that, a lot of research needs to be done. You have to speak to a lot of stakeholders. You have to go down to the pharmacy and you find out, okay, if you have an idea that solves for the society, you need to first identify who is that last stakeholder who gives it to the society. And first ask them, how do they function? What is it that they look at? What are their deals of breaking a deal or making a deal? What are the things that they would work for or not work for? And then see who is the next stakeholder that supplies to them, and then who's the next. Where is the chain? We call it the chain of money and the chain of care analysis. And we try to identify each stakeholder, and we try to think who's going to cut us if we bring this technology out, and why they'll cut us, or who's going to be very excited to bring this out and beat the gun. That kind of, a lot of thought process has to be done when you're solving for the billions.
Okay. So you're one of the rare doctors who talks like a designer, engineer, and an entrepreneur. How does one go about being multidisciplinary and get this be learned?
So I did not think of being multiple things. So I basically, I'm a very non-trusting kind of guy and very impulsive. So it's just a personality like this. I've been like this since my childhood. So, especially if somebody tells something, or if there is widely felt belief, I feel like I need to challenge it. If somebody says, oh, you're a doctor, you're a surgeon, you should only do surgeries. So what I do is, okay, I listen to it, but I also use my common sense. I was like, boss, if I am a surgeon and I cannot do surgery without surgical tools, then why am I not involved in the development of surgical tools, which I use as a surgeon? I mean, that is a part of my job. Right? If I'm going to cut somebody's sinus and nose, or if I'm going to treat someone, how am I not being involved in that most critical part, which is the tool that I use? So I use a bit of the common sense, and I listen to what my peers are saying. Nay, yaar, we import the technologies. We import 80% of medical devices. We export 65% of medical devices. Ridiculous. So I think it doesn't make sense, but that is what people believe. So I am not a blind believer in things. And especially when someone puts out a blanket rule, ki nahi, hum aise hi karenge, then mere andar I start jumping, like, aise kyun karenge? I want to understand, is there a scientific reason for it? Is there a logical reason for it? And then I try it. And 90% of the time, whenever I have challenged anything, it has always turned out to be wrong. I mean, it's always turned out to be that the original belief was wrong. People say you can't do multiple things. I am doing multiple things very easily. It is really not difficult at all. If you have good teams, you have flexibility and you can manage your time, you can do multiple things. I may add 3-4 more things also. So it's basically about what you feel like doing, how passionate you are, and how much impact you want to create. And if you figure out the way to do it, there are no rules, right? As long as you're not harming people.
So if you say, oh, you're a doctor also, you're an innovator also, you've written books also, you're doing comedy also, now you're doing a talk show, now you're rapping. But I'm doing that because I'm adapting to the situation. Now everything is going online, so I'm doing different things. But there are no rules ki, "Arey, yaar, to yehi karna hai." That's what I usually don't follow, and I don't feel comfortable following, especially if it is enforced without logic. Anything enforced without logic, I try to challenge it. And most of the times, I know there are sometimes I've challenged some things which I realize, okay, what was followed is correct. That also happens. But there are many times when I challenge something, I realize, oh, people just believe something, but that's not really true. And that's what gives me a first mover advantage. And that's how you do gap identification. That's how you do impact creation. That's one of the most important parts of creating innovations as well.
And I guess the crux of having an innovative mindset is that, you just allow yourself to explore. Because if you're not doing that, how do you kind of, keep adapting? And thankfully, you at your young age as well, you are just keeping yourself open to the many, many possibilities and the, I guess, endless opportunities that life has to offer. And I believe you're just kind of, making the most of it. If I really see it in terms of all the diversification of your various domains.
Yeah, the science behind it is you have to be absolutely comfortable with failing and being made fun of, being mocked at, being criticized. You have to be absolutely comfortable with that and look at it as a process to be someone like me. Otherwise, it's not possible. If you're going to be conscious, or people are like, oh, yeah, doctor, he's making so many mistakes, his surgeries would also be like that. And that's one of the reasons why doctors don't like to diversify, because it dilutes their image. And people have told me, तो जोकर की तरह एक्ट करेगा तो जोकर के पास पेशेंट क्यों आएगा? I'm like, बात सही है. Why will a person come with someone who's taking things lightly? But after I started doing stand-up comedy, my patients increased 5 times. And then I'm asking the patient, जोकर के पास क्यों आ रहे हो? तो बोल रहे हैं, sir, it's better to go than someone who's trying to fleece our money than someone who's, having a sense of humor. And I connected with you on your videos. I feel you're going to be more trustworthy because they made a human connection with the joke. It's very different in reality, and it's very different from what people will think as a perception. People say, yeah, you talk about failures. You did a show on show on failures. Do you fail while doing surgeries? I said, no, boss, it's different. If you fail first, fail fast, fail cheap, your number of failures reduce, and how to manage failures become stronger. So if I have the reason why during our clinical training, someone like me would have failed in every possible way under supervision. So once I practice, I know how to deal with things that go wrong. Now you tell me, will you go under the knife with someone who has never dealt with a bad situation, or will you go under the knife who knows how to manage every potentially thought bad decision? Right? Whose hands are you going to be safer in? So, because surgeries are things that you cannot control. There is a body that is there that controls half the things, and then it's you. You control half the things. There could be a bleeder anytime. There could be anything. And you need to be okay and comfortable to manage all the situations. And somebody who's dealt with a lot of failures and a lot of bad situations, normally it becomes a routine to become very calm and handle those things. So, it's very different in reality versus what people perceive. And everything that I'm doing today, there have been at least 100 people who have told me not to do.
Okay, fantastic. Different folks, different strokes. I'm glad that everything is working well in your case. I wanted to understand that, is our aversion towards failing to do something with us as Indians as a community? And how can this attitude be ingrained in us very early on?
People openly talking about it. And that's happening in many things. See, mental illnesses have been a stigma. Now being depressed is a cool thing. Like, earlier people would be like, never go talk to a psychiatrist. But now a lot of Western influence, yaar, main therapist ke paas baitha tha, therapy karai. Now it becomes a cool thing to say that, I'm like, no, elite therapist hai mera. But earlier people would be like, oh, I don't want to go to a psychiatrist. People think I'm mentally ill. This thing about all mental illnesses being called mad. I've grown up in that time. Ye to mental hai, pagal hai, that kind of thing. But now people are realizing that mental illnesses are depression, anxiety, stress, suicidal tendencies, and being crazy. And that has happened because people have been openly talking about it. And it has been okay to talk about it. And similarly, for failures, we have to be more open to talk about it. A lot of people do talk about it. But it has to be a very practical approach. And, like, for example, when we train anybody in innovations, I run courses. I've been involved in many academic institutes while teaching.
Right.
We do an entire session on failures, the science of failure, the art of failing, the importance of failing. I wrote a book called Benefits of Failing Successfully. You're welcome to read it. It talks about how failures have helped being an entrepreneur. And and as you start talking about it and other people listen to it and then they become comfortable talking about it, that's the only way this whole mindset is going to change. And just like me, there are many other people who talk about their examples. And if you go to anybody who successfully ever invented anything, will always have all the good things to say about failures. Because if they hadn't failed, they would have never been able to invent. So I think you should also talk to who's an expert in failing to get the background about it.
Yeah, well said, well said. When you encounter any problem and you innovate around it, how do you validate the market scope? As we see that there are not much innovative products out there in the market, let alone the mindsets. How to bring the products which have a limited market scope? This is a question by Abhishek.
You have to first internally within you and yourself and your team decide, why do you want to bring a product which has a limited market scope? Firstly, why do you want to do that? Is there a personal reason for it? Is it a small village or a small society of people that you want to impact? There is no right or wrong, and there's no reason why you should not do it. But you should have the reasons clear, because the approach to bring that out will be very different. Like, for example, if you think it's a very niche population, there's a small society of people you want to benefit, then the business model you choose or the model that you choose to bring it out to them should probably be an NGO should fund that whole thing. Do a fundraiser, make an open source technology and, get it out there. But if you want to impact the masses or the billions or the society, then it has to fit into the system where other technologies have impacted billions in the societies. So you have to decide, why you want to do it. And if you want to do it, what is the right way to reach to them? Because if you're going to go to a very limited market and then you're going to go to a venture capitalist or an angel investor, they're not going to invest. They're not going to see, the potential in it to scale up. So then you have to figure out, okay, whether you can self-fund it or not. You can take a loan. I have 11 ongoing loans. I am not from a rich background. My father is a government employee, and I do private practice and I do stand-up comedy, and I do a lot of these things. But I don't wait. I believe in moving. The time has to move forward. So whenever I'm testing something and all of that, I do a quick fundraise. I do crowdfundings a lot. I take loans, personal loans. Loans with assets. I don't do any savings. My liquidity is hardly anything. But I keep taking risk, and that's one of the things that you have to do as an entrepreneur. You have to take risk. So if you believe that this is a small niche thing, the market is not big, but you're very passionate about it, then you figure out ways within your capabilities to solve it. Then don't go outside. But if you think there is something that you can offer to a third party in the process of benefiting larger number of people, then you have to approach private equity or venture capital funding or grants, those kind of things. A lot of clarity has to be in the entire pathway. That's basically the principle of any invention, is you have to analyze from your idea till the last user, all the stakeholders involved, what will it take to get it there, and what would be the right approach. And that's a very simple analytical process that you need to do, rather than first thinking of the idea and then figuring it out on the way. That can be very, very a long journey and a very, very difficult journey.
Right. So, Dr. Chaturvedi, I wanted to know from you that, in the current scenario of COVID-19 and its, widespread, what is your insights into the situation? One, that you are again in the healthcare domain. B, you are also in the innovations domain. How long do you think this entire COVID situation within India would last? And also that, are we doing sufficient, by staying home and, practicing social distancing? Are we doing enough for mitigating the risk?
Yeah, so an epidemic and a pandemic is not new to us. I mean, even going forward and what's happened in the past, once every 1 or 2 years, we have an epidemic or a pandemic of a respiratory influenza virus or a coronavirus. And it's happened with H1N1, which is far more dangerous and impacted a lot of lives. A couple of years, I think a few years ago, we've had SARS, we've had MERS, we've had swine flu, we've had, Ebola. We've had, so it's a trend, and that's basically, viruses have the way to survive, just like we have a way to survive. Their organisms, they will mutate and they'll keep coming back. Going forward also, we're going to keep having these epidemics and pandemics once every 1 or 2 years. It's nothing that it's something out of the routine. It's just that access to social media and access to billions of minds coming onto your WhatsApp every day has become, a way to show you the magnitude of it now, and that people are now, it's settling in. Earlier, probably many people would not even know about a lot of these, viruses, but now everything is a trending topic. So that's the reason why there's more awareness, which I think is a good thing. Because if you look at the way we as a country have handled, the outbreak of Corona or COVID-19 in India has been remarkable compared to many other well-developed countries, because we acted very quickly. The same, initiatives of lockdown, social distancing and awareness, if it was done maybe a few weeks later, we would probably be in the same situation as many of the other countries that are in. So I think the government has taken an aggressive approach, and more importantly, a vast majority of the population who have access to phones and internet have complied to a large extent. And that itself is, I think, a very, very strong thing. And you can see our numbers are not very high. There have been unfortunate deaths. There are going to be some peaks now in the next couple of weeks as more and more people who are in the incubation period now start having symptoms. But still, looking at 1.3 billion people with varied mindsets, it's a remarkable achievement. New hospitals are being created, new wards have been kept away, isolated, new testing kits. The government has quickly made Indian manufacturing of testing kits, quickly. There are a lot of ventilator manufacturing initiatives. So I think we are gearing up really well. And that's probably because of the access to digital platforms that people have. And I think so far we are in good shape. See, normally any epidemic takes 3 to 5 months to plateau, even for H1N1 or even for Ebola, whichever. And if you look at China also, it is plateaued around that same period. And that's basically the data and analytics of most viruses. That's why they call it viral, no? Because you're not there persistently on the peak. You go up for some time, you create a huge impact, and then you taper down with herd immunity. And that's how the viruses behave, because that's the word viral came. So when someone is viral, someone's not viral for 12 months. Now, he became viral or she became viral for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and it circulated a lot. That's exactly the word comes from how viruses work. So after a point of time, their impact of creating deaths and their virulence comes down after they finish peaking in a community. And I think we're already close to being 2 months into this. And so far, I think Kerala has already started to flatten the curve. And some other states are also starting to do that. There have been certain, places where we didn't follow this properly. There have been herds and groups of people, and that's why the spread has happened in certain states. But in vast majority, I think we are on the right track, and I would see this go away by maybe end of May or mid June is what I would estimate.
I see. So we'll take 2 more questions before we conclude the webinar. One is by Pratima Bhagat. She'd like to know how the upcoming technology like IoT will play a role in healthcare innovation.
The Internet of Things and a lot of this information and digital is very hard to get into the therapeutic domain for healthcare. Right now, the place where we struggle in our healthcare space, most of the gaps which create a lot of problems are in the treatment aspect. And because of very poor involvement of doctors and most of the innovators being from non-medical side, the technologies are leaning towards information technology, big data, IoT, AI, because they don't have the core understanding of treatment, and it's very hard to bring treatment with these platforms. So a lot of this preventive, informative, predictive
solutions will take some time while India matures for it. Maybe a lot of developed Western markets are mature for it. You must have seen the rise and fall of the Fitbit, right? It didn't sustain, even though it was very informative, predictive, and all of those kind of things. Wellness products peaked for some time. They went viral for some time, and then we developed herd immunity towards them as well. So we don't use that as often. But so having said that, I think we are still a decade behind where these AIs and IoTs will dominate. For that, we need an entire healthcare infrastructure that can support the information that comes from this, the preventive aspects. Right now, even for something which is an immediate risk, like COVID-19, coronavirus can infect you. Still, people go out without a mask because they feel, yeah, मेरे को नहीं होगा, मैं तो safe हूँ. And you want an app to tell you that you're not safe, and they're like, oh, that's not the way it's going to happen, right? So for preventive, informative, and predictive digital based solutions, I don't think we're still ready. The westernized markets are ready. Like if you look at the metropolitan cities and the urban population, there's still a very big impactful group of people that you can benefit. They will still adapt to this, but for the whole country and for the grassroots to develop it would still be, I think, at least a couple of decades, a decade or more away is what I would say. But if you're asking what is it that we need today, is we need treatment. We need better solutions to treat people who are already ill, rather than work on things where other people may prevent becoming ill because of your technology. And for the simple reason that the one who's ill is always very aligned to get the treatment. Somebody who's having diabetes, hypertension, or is about to have a heart attack, or is having cancer, or is having or about to go blind, or is having some sort of a disease, is obviously going to be a lot more compliant to treatment. So they're going to adopt the technology and they're going to benefit from it. Versus someone like, if you don't drink water 10 times a day, then you may go into dehydration. So my app will vibrate every time you need to drink water. They're like, मेरे को क्यों करना है ये? प्यास लगेगी मैं पी लेगा. It's like that. But I'm not. It's just an example. I'm not trying to trivialize it. But I'm just saying that we need to move more towards a therapeutic domain or critical care monitoring. Those are the areas where I think we need to look towards, and we still have a decade before we can start implementing more of these AI, predictive, and IoT technologies.
Sure. Thank you. I wanted to also understand the importance of structured education along your journey. So let's say that you are a first generation, multidisciplined phenomena. I would call you a phenomenon. So, and then yes, you went in and studied for, becoming a surgeon, and then it moved on to, of course, I think skill sets wise, okay, fine, you figured out that you want to write a book, and then you wanted to do stand-up comedy, but overall in the entire picture of being able to innovate or actually bring your vision to reality, how important is structured education?
So let me look at structure like this. So now I think the structure should allow no structure for some time. I think if everything is too structured and you follow it, even in education, it restricts creative thinking.
Right.
But like, for example, if you look at our schools, I studied in Bangalore. I didn't study in any popular school, but you will have like one free period in a day. Like maybe the teacher is not there, they call it free period, or you do one class, or you do some arts class or something like that. But I think, the whole daily schedule, if there is a structure that allows you free thinking, allows you to fail, allows you to experiment, that is very important. So even though I follow a lot of structure in innovations using the biodesign process, I follow a particular set of structured, principles while I'm working with teams for stand-up comedy, or while acting in a web series, or while writing a book. But each of these structures allows flexibility. And I think that structured flexibility is what I think is needed in our education system. And I think that is beginning to happen now. And people are becoming a little more cognizant about some amount of flexibility during structure as well. And I think, to answer your question, is we need structured flexibility, but too much of structure, I think, can be inhibitory to allow free thinking. People will take longer to break open, and people find it harder to adapt to failures.
Right. I think structured flexibility totally is the right word. Even at the MIT ID Innovation Program, the endeavor is again to ensure that there's a whole lot of practical, a whole lot of focus on practical time that's been given. So yes, structured flexibility is the need of the hour. For more questions, I would recommend all participants to reach out to Dr. Jagdish Chaturvedi. He is reachable on LinkedIn. I will share the LinkedIn profile link as well. And he's widely covered in the public domain. So accessible on all social channels. So feel free to have the rest of your questions answered offline, one-to-one. We'll conclude the webinar here. Thank you so much, Dr. Jagdish, for your time and sharing your insights.
Yeah, thank you. And if you want to get in touch with me, my social media handles are @Dr. Jagdish Chatur. You can also download our app HIIIH from Play Store or iOS, watch the web series, or you can interact and find team members. And even if you chat on that platform, I'm accessible. My email ID is jagdish@hi.in. But with that, thank you, Priya, and the MIT ID Innovation Program for having me. Hope this was useful, and I look forward to staying in touch again.
Yes, absolutely useful. And also a round of thanks to our participants for joining us today. I'd like to invite all participants to our next webinar. Please save the date 14th April, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Our guest speaker will be Mr. Amit Salvi, Senior Scientist at TCS, who will talk about innovation in the times of disruption. So request you all to register soon for the same. And for those who tuned in late, this curated series on healthcare innovations for today will feature a variety of industry thought leaders like Dr. Jagdish Chaturvedi and speakers who are a part of the MIT ID innovation ecosystem. MIT stands for the 4-decade-old Maharashtra Institute of Technology. ID stands for MIT's 15-year-old Institute of Design. And the one-year innovation program, which definitely offers structured flexibility, is the latest offering of MIT ID. It aims to create a new breed of comprehensive innovators, informed by design thinking, influenced by future technologies and trends, and inspired to make their own mark in the global scenario, be it political, social, economic, or technological. Do stay connected, stay safe, stay home, and keep innovating every day. Thank you once again, Dr. Jagdish. We will see you offline soon again, and yes, in future webinars as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.